Everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Communicating About Tough Topics, Caring for Yourself While Caring for Others. This is part of the Can Do MS webinar series that we present along with the National MS Society, the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada, and Needy Meds. I'm thrilled to introduce three speakers this evening. We have Myra and Steve Lazanik, who's a couple living with MS from Elkhorn, Nebraska. And we have Dr. Roz Cobb, who may be a familiar face to many of you. She is a clinical psychologist and a senior programs consultant for Can Do MS, and she is from Bath, Maine, but she's actually joining us live tonight from Nebraska City, Nebraska. So the Cornhusker State is well represented this evening. So I'm going to turn things over first to Myra to introduce herself, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, as Brian said, I'm Myra Lazanik, and I'm actually from Omaha, which is Elkhorn is a suburb of Omaha. I'm a retired teacher. I was diagnosed with MS in 1982 when I was 29. My MS started progressing about 10 years ago, and so now I have a significant amount of trouble walking, and so I have to use a cane for short distances and a scooter when we go out for longer trips. This is my husband, Steve.
Hi, as she said, Steve Lazanik here. I recently retired and now I'm at home with Myra. We've been married 37 years, and of those 37 years, 36 of them, we've been working with the issues around MS.
And I'm Roz Cobb, and I'm thrilled to be here with Myra and Steve. I was just doing some quick calculations, and I started my career in MS about 2 years before Myra was diagnosed. So we've been on a separate but parallel journey with MS for all these years, and we're going to have fun speaking with you tonight. So I think the first thing we're going to do is talk about why this is important this month. Thanks, Steve.
Sure. November, as the slide shows, is National Family Caregivers Month. Can Do MS addresses the needs and challenges of support partners like us. Support partners are also impacted by MS. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. We are part of what's going on within the family. Living well with MS takes a team effort. Shared decision-making, mutual understanding, finding tools and resources and strategies, and then having confidence in each other and what we've learned to move forward. Communication is the basis for this team effort, and without communication, the struggle is a lot more. MS can create barriers to communication and challenges for persons living with MS and support partners, which we can attest to that communication and the challenges are really there. With that being said, Roz, could you go over the learning objectives?
Sure, thanks, Steve. So what we're hoping for tonight is that all of you living with MS and support partners will be able, by the end of the program, to really talk about what are the key elements involved in having an effective, comfortable, and balanced support partnership where you take care of each other. Also, to understand how the symptoms of MS and the unpredictability of this challenging illness can really have an impact on partnerships. As Steve mentioned, we're going to talk about the importance of communication and how that helps you maintain a healthy partnership as you live through these challenges. And what are some of the ways that MS creates barriers to open and comfortable communication, and some tips for how to manage those barriers and continue to communicate comfortably with each other. So let's look at what we know about support partners for people with MS. There's been a lot of research done in this area, and we've also talked over the years to many support partners. We know that they are looking for optimal ways to take care of and support the person they love. That caregiving and providing support gives people a great sense of satisfaction. They feel proud of what they do and gain good feelings about it. They often say that it has increased their closeness as a couple or in their relationship, and that having to manage the challenges of MS together has helped to build coping skills. We also know, however, that support partners can experience a very high level of stress and anxiety, as well as depression on their own. And so we're going to be talking about all of those things tonight. Support partners are also likely to neglect their own needs, their own health and wellness, because they are so focused on the needs of the person for whom they're providing care. And I think we see a real unique version of don't ask, don't tell among support partners, that they are often not asked by healthcare providers or anyone else how they're doing, and they tend not to speak up, to vocalize their feelings or their needs or to ask for help. So Steve, prior to going to Can Do, did you talk to anybody else about your role as a support partner or your feelings about it?
As Myra said, no, I didn't. I was truly living in the don't ask, don't tell. Okay. I didn't know who to ask or who to tell. You got to remember that this was back in 1982. The web wasn't available to us. The information you had to search out. We did get a little information about having MS and what it was all about. But for me to go talk to, that didn't exist, or I didn't know where to get it. Only recently, and one of your choices was a healthcare provider. Just recently, I've had a healthcare provider ask me, is there anything critical or important in my life that they need to know about? And then, I mentioned this, and so soon I'll be going back for a checkup, and I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit.
Glad to hear it. So we don't have to do the math, but to me that means that you, Steve, were living quite a few years between the time of Myra's diagnosis and first going to Can Do, where you were really living with this and keeping it all to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, this synopsis is about Larry and Jan and how they're facing a new diagnosis. Larry and Jan have been married for 10 years and have 2 children in high school. Larry is a contractor and Jan is a retail salesperson. Larry was diagnosed 9 months ago with relapsing MS and is experiencing blurred vision, numbness, and severe fatigue. With college looming for his kids and his increased medical expenses, the family finances are very tight. Larry loves his job, but finding the physical demands and the long days are becoming unmanageable. And so he comes home wiped out and irritable. As a man of the house, he is determined to keep working and be independent. And Steve will talk about Jan's situation.
So we have Jan's situation on this slide, and I can relate to this early on in our journey. Jan's feeling lost, confused. What is MS? What's going to happen? What am I supposed to do? What happened to our life? And I'm really scared of what the future holds. Larry's sending me a lot of mixed signals, which is making it difficult for her to know when to help. I'm fine, don't baby me. Can't you see I'm exhausted? I need your help. I can handle this myself. My body feels like a stranger. These are all typical things that we hear. Jan constantly feels worried about her husband and the kids, stressed about family finances, and is anxious about the future. Jan has picked up extra hours at work, stopped attending exercise classes.
I'll recommend that Larry and Jan talk about first. Should they talk about Larry's MS symptoms, family finances, Larry's mixed signals that he's giving to Jan, Jan's confusion and stress, or something else? Okay, so Larry's mixed signal kind of tops the list. 39% of people thought that was where they needed to start. And then right behind that, a discussion of Larry's MS symptoms and Jan's confusion and stress were next. nobody thought that talking about the family finances right now was the most important thing. So let's think about what their priorities are. So as we talked about the priorities among ourselves, we really thought that it was important to help Jan be a more confident and effective support partner so that she would have a better sense of what to do and how to do it. But we also needed to help Jan communicate her own needs and prioritize her self-care. We need to help Larry communicate his needs in a less confusing way so that he can get the support that he needs. And we also need to help the family get some control over their finances and plan for what Steve has referred to as the very unpredictable future. So Myra and Steve, do you have any other thoughts about their priorities at this point?
I do. I feel like they really, really need to just sit down and talk to each other and tell each other what they're feeling and what their concerns are. And if they can't really do that on their own, maybe they could see a counselor, or maybe even just a family or friend person that they could just sort of sit between the two and you know, paraphrase what each person is saying. Because I think until you can get those emotions out on the table, you really can't go forward.
You have to become comfortable with the conversation. It's a difficult topic, and it's a wall to get over. It's a hurdle, and once you can get through that, then they can start moving forward.
I agree completely, and I think the advice about sometimes using a third party is really helpful. Sometimes just having the third party present helps to diffuse a difficult or tense situation and can help jumpstart the conversation. So I think that's great. So let's look at what our suggestions are for next steps. So first and foremost, I think that Larry and Jan need to learn how to find reliable sources of information they can trust. They have to be able to manage challenging conversations, as we've been talking about all the things that are worrying both of them. They have to build a support team, and that support team can include healthcare professionals, relatives, friends, anybody they find to be a source of support at this time. And they need to learn how to find community and online resources that they can trust to help them with all these complex areas of their lives. Steve and Myra, did you find any of these in particular to be very important for the two of you?
Reliable.
Well, the reliable sources actually came from one of the can-dos that we went to, and those resources were made available to us, and we started researching them, and that was the catalyst to us kind of moving forward and getting through some of these hurdles and having more conversations. And we still listen to these webinars. I mean, we've listened to tons of these, and every time we're finished, we sit down and we have a discussion about what that was about and how we're feeling. And so it has really, the can-do programs are really great resources. And also looking at the National MS Society website, that's a great resource of finding help in all different sorts of ways.
And the one thing too with like listening in on the webinars, the conversations she mentions, we're able to have that in a very relaxed setting. There's not a lot of tension. We're not upset with each other. We've been discussing things, so there are no hidden agendas or hidden secrets that we don't know about. And so we can freely talk back and forth. And that conversation might go on for an hour or so. So it's very helpful. And like she said, having the MS Society, having those sources available to us is a big help.
Music to our ears. Okay, so Myra and Steve, so the whole issue about sending mixed signals, was that anything that, oh, we're not there yet. Oh, I'm sorry. So, Myra, could you please introduce us to our next couple, Sally and Jeff? Boy, I'm going to get you all confused. I'm sorry.
Sally and Jeff is the next scenario, and Sally is living with relapsing MS, and it's been for about 2 years now. And she's the accountant of the family. She balances the checkbook, pays the bills, and organizes appointments. And these skills are now more difficult for her. She's also having trouble keeping up with conversations and finding words as quickly as she used to. Her mood goes from happy one moment to angry and sad the next. She experiences fatigue and uncomfortable sensory changes in her limbs, and she feels just disconnected from her body, mind, and is angry at these changes that she's seeing in herself. I can certainly associate with all of that.
And I agree, and I might have mentioned this on the previous one, that the layout of these scenarios pretty much mirrors our journey. But we have Jeff here, doesn't understand the changes going on in Sally's mood or thinking. I mean, there are no warning signs. There's nothing there. She doesn't have a broken arm that he can see. Oh, there's a broken arm. I understand what's going on. These are all things occurring inside her body and mind, and changes he can't address right away. He wants to be supportive, but feels defeated in his efforts and resentful of the changes in their lives. Sally and Jeff don't talk as often as they used to and have not expressed their fears or concerns to each other. Both recognize a loss of intimacy, but neither knows where to start to recreate their once close and solid relationship.
So let's see what our audience thinks is the biggest barrier to Sally and Jeff's communication right now. Is it Sally's cognitive and mood changes? Is it confusion and lack of information about MS? Is it fear and resentment about the MS-related changes that are happening? Or embarrassment and discomfort about discussing feelings? Or is it simply not knowing how to start the conversation? Wow, there are a lot that come out close. So the biggest number, 39%, say that they just don't know how to start the conversation, which seems to be a very common problem for couples. After that, even if they know how to start it, they're embarrassed or feel uncomfortable talking about their feelings, or they have some fear or resentment about the MS-related challenges. So maybe they feel a little uncomfortable about sharing that fear and resentment. And then a few people mentioned the cognitive and mood changes that Sally's experienced, and a few mentioned confusion and lack of information. So that's very helpful. So now, Myra and Steve, did you experience any of these in particular yourselves, or feel that confusion?
I'll say that the not knowing how to start the conversation was key for me, or big. I used to come home and say, how are you feeling? Okay. To me, in my mind, I was asking, how was your MS? Have you experienced any changes in your symptoms? But I never could say the term or the phrase MS or multiple sclerosis. So that's where it was for me, not knowing how to start the conversation, but then also the embarrassment and discomfort of not starting a conversation. So I think when you look at the breakdown of the percentages, I would agree with all of those at that level, but the key was not knowing how to start the conversation.
Great, thank you. So I guess one of the things that I want to call out here, not very many people mention Sally's cognitive or mood changes, but I think, in my experience anyway, those can frequently be very confusing for a support partner and make it difficult for the support partner to know when and how to initiate a conversation. Sometimes mood changes in MS are so extreme that support partners describe feeling like they're walking on eggshells. They don't know when it's okay to bring up a difficult topic or when to start a conversation, because the person with MS might react in a very negative way or a very emotional way. So the conversation shuts down. And sometimes cognitive changes, which are also very common in MS, can make conversations a little bit frustrating. So I'm interested that not as many people mention those as problems to communication, just because we hear about them so much at some of our programs. So from our perspective, addressing Sally's mood and cognitive changes to help her feel more like herself again seemed like a high priority. That with mood changes affecting more than 50% of people with MS and cognitive changes affecting upwards of 65%, that's always something that we try to zero in on in order to help communication and relationships. We want to help Sally and Jeff reconnect as a couple because there's so many barriers now getting in the way of them feeling close and doing the kind of shared problem solving that we want them to be able to do. And all of that is also an effort to help Jeff feel less lost, helpless, and defeated. He's really at sea, and as Steve has described, that's a pretty familiar feeling. Any other comments, Steve and Meyer, that you want to make about these priorities?
Yes, I'd like to say something about helping them reconnect. I think for Steve and I, we started noticing that we weren't really going out very much because I had trouble walking. And so it was always, I was counting my steps and, you know, how far am I going to have to walk? I don't think I can do that today. And so then when, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but when I finally got a scooter, we started, that just sort of opened up our whole world. And we started talking about how many things we could actually do now if I took my scooter along and he could walk and I could ride. And so that has been happening for the last 3 years now. And that has just changed our lives completely, because now it just like there is no barrier. I can do everything as long as I can get my scooter in there. I mean, I don't like to take it into a restaurant so much, but a lot of times I can be dropped at the door, so I don't need it. But there are ways to get around it if you really problem solve.
Great.
And there's another issue that I could talk to here is that Jeff feeling lost and helpless, defeated. People are visual learners. You see traffic lights and you stop or you go. You look at the speedometer on your car and you know how fast you're going. You look at this and you react to that. There's no fuel gauge. There's no indicator with the person with MS. So when the support partner comes in, you don't have a visual to tell you how the day is going. It has to come through communication and understanding the symptoms and the reality of what you're faced with every day, because it's constantly changing. It can change by the hour. It can change by the minute, by the second. It can even change. So you have to be able to relax and take that information in that you're hearing and noticing body or mood changes and reacting to those types of things.
Sounds like it would be really helpful to have a fuel gauge, an MS fuel gauge that everybody
right over the head.
Right over the head, so you can tell what's going on. That's great. Okay, so in terms of next steps for Sally and Jeff, we suggest asking a healthcare provider about Sally's mood and cognitive changes if those haven't been discussed. The healthcare provider does need to know about them because he or she can provide appropriate referrals to mental health professionals and perhaps a speech language pathologist, so that Sally can get some good assessment of her mood and cognition and find out what, if anything's going on, and what treatment might be needed. For themselves, Sally and Jeff might want to do some more learning about mood and cognitive changes in MS and the strategies to manage them using archived webinars on the Can Do website, or the brochures that are available on the National MS Society website that describe all of these symptoms. It's easier to ask questions and learn how to take care of them if you have that background information to work from. This is where the support network can become so valuable. If Sally and Jeff can reach out to friends and family for support until they're better able to support each other, until they've reconnected in a more comfortable way. We want them to be able to access other support services from peers living with MS or from professionals. And as we're going to talk about in a little bit, learn and practice some communication strategies that'll help them talk about these difficult topics. Anything else you want to add to those next steps, you two?
That's a great list, and it's really comprehensive.
Good. So Myra, do you want to introduce us to Bill and Ann?
Sure. So Bill and Ann are facing increasing disability. They've been together for 20 years. Bill has been diagnosed with primary progressive MS for nearly 10 years and recently retired on disability due to his progression. He can walk only a few yards before losing his balance or becoming exhausted. He refuses to use a mobility aid because he doesn't want to look handicapped. They used to travel frequently and enjoy outdoor activities together, but have stopped. Bill spends all day at home. Bill is also experiencing bladder and sexual function symptoms, but refuses to seek treatment, and intimacy is out the window. Very much, there's a lot of this that's very much like our situation.
And we have Ann as the support partner, has taken on all the household chores, would like to ask Bill to help, but worries that it's selfish to ask him. She used to take long walks outside, but has stopped so she can be at home. Without time to cook healthy meals, she usually orders takeout, and she's experienced significant weight gain, which she blames on the changes in their intimacy, but she's almost too depressed to care.
Okay, so let's ask our audience, how can Ann, as a support partner, best communicate her desire for Bill to use a mobility aid? Should she point out the activities and the travel that they could do together? Should she explain that it could help her stress and weight gain? Or maybe suggest he talk with a friend who uses a scooter to see what it might be like? Seek advice from a neurologist or a physical about the use of a scooter, or share articles on the pros of using mobility devices. We have another tie. So point out activities and travel that they could do together, and seek advice from a neurologist or physical therapist. I think those are actually excellent recommendations. Another one that people favored was talking with a friend who uses a scooter, and I think that happens a lot, particularly at Can Do programs, as I'm sure Myra can attest. If people go to a program and meet others who are using a scooter and just talk about the experience and figure out what they got from it, that can be extremely helpful. I just want to point out the one about stress and weight gain. One of the side benefits for support partners when the person with MS gets a mobility device is that the person riding the scooter can go at a pretty good clip. So for support partners trying to keep up, it's a very good exercise regimen. So what were your experiences when you started to talk about using the mobility aid?
Well, we hadn't gotten to the point of starting to talk about it, we were still fairly mobile, but it was starting to slow down. And we went to the Can Do seminar, and one of the people there, I think more than one actually, had a scooter. And so I started talking with him about a scooter and his care partner. And we started learning about it and came home and started looking around and started checking into it. And we just had the discussion that it was time.
But I really wasn't for it. I was like, I still didn't want that stigma of being in a scooter or a wheelchair. It was bad enough I had a cane. And it was like, I didn't want to do it. But he took the lead and started doing research, and then just gradually kind of picked at my brain until I came around.
And that did open up our world, and it opened up everything really for us. It actually started getting conversations going again. But the talk about Ann's used to go on long walks outside. The two of us did that. Both of us were very fast walkers. But over time, the walk was slowing down and getting shorter and shorter till it no longer existed. And just the other few weeks ago, it dawned on me how I'm able to get out and actually stretch my legs and be with her going through the neighborhood. And at times I actually have to tell her to speed up a little bit because she's starting to look around at trees and plants and things in people's yards. And, you know, I want to get moving and work up a little heart rate going there. So it worked out quite well for us. We've actually put a lift in our car so that if need be and I'm not around, she can put the scooter in the car, go somewhere, unload it, and go into the store, wherever it is she's going, and then come home safe and sound.
You know, one of the things that's so wonderful about what the two of you are saying is that this is really a tool for the family.
Yes.
It may be a mobility aid for the person living with MS, but it's a tool that the whole family benefits from, like a toaster or a washing machine or a computer. Clearly the two of you have gained a lot from your shared use of a mobility aid. So thank you for sharing that. So what are Bill and Ann's priorities right now? Obviously helping Ann communicate how a mobility aid can improve their relationship and quality of life. But it's also going to be really important to help Bill talk about how he's feeling and what he needs in a more effective way. We want to help them nurture their partnership so that they feel like more of a team and function better together. And we want to help Ann improve her health and wellness, get that weight under control and her stress managed. Any thoughts or additional recommendations that you have for Bill and Ann?
No, I don't think so.
I think you touched on it, that it opens up everything. It opens the door to start communicating again. You just start seeing life in a different view, from a different viewpoint. There's that old saying that about sled dogs, that if you're not the lead dog, the scenery never changes. And I think in our situation, as our world was closing in, we were letting MS be the lead dog, and we were behind the lead dog, and our view was not changing at all. Getting the mobility aid, the scooter, allowed one of us or both of us to trade off and be the lead dog, and we put MS behind us, and we could move on.
You really opened up your world. That's a wonderful description, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. So what are some possible next steps for Bill and Ann? We do want them to learn as much as they can about primary progressive MS and how to manage symptoms, and that information can come from, again, the National MS Society website and brochures on virtually every symptom, as well as information about primary progressive MS. We hope that they'll investigate wellness strategies that will help them both stay as healthy and well as they possibly can, which includes all of these things listed here: meal planning, exercise, adaptive equipment, and doing regular preventive care that all adults need. And those things frequently kind of get lost with all the medical needs associated with MS, but they both need to attend to their preventive care. How to utilize their support system, which is as big as they choose to make it, and research accessible travel and recreation options because their world can really open up, as Myra and Steve have been telling us, and learn strategies to communicate with one another about anything that's important to them, but particularly about how to make their relationship as good as it can possibly be. I'm sure you've had some experiences related to all of these. Steve and Myra, anything you want to comment on here?
Well, I would like to say that here in Omaha, I'm kind of lucky because I found a gym that is for people with MS, and all of the exercises are geared toward people with some sort of handicap. And there are people all across the spectrum of different levels of disability. And it has turned out to be one of the best things that I could have ever done. I was just telling Steve today that I never went to a gym ever before that. I mean, I wasn't a person that liked to do that sort of thing. I would get my exercise other ways. And so, but the fellowship that we have there of talking to them about, you know, what is their doctor having them do? Did you go to the PT? What are they having you do? Doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just that you're getting a baseline of knowledge, and it's been a wonderful thing. And I know that you can go online and just put in exercise programs, and there are things out there that you can actually do, and they have tele exercise classes that you can do in your home if you are wheelchair bound or homebound and can't get out, or you live alone and you can't get out. Then you could do those kinds of things right from your wheelchair or from a chair at home. And so it's very, very important to exercise. I cannot say that enough. I know years ago they used to say that was the worst thing because you're going to get all heated up, and heat's bad for people with MS. Not true. You can get through it. They have cooling things that you can buy. I wear a thing I put in the freezer, in the refrigerator, and I put it around my neck and keep me cool when it's hot out. And so there are ways to get around that. So I guess that would be one, just a big wellness strategy there.
You talk about travel. That's key. That keeps your relationship and strengthens your relationship. But a lot of the discussion here is about communication. There's something, and I can't remember what it is, but they say we have our personal space. And I think it's something like, 20, 30 inches around us is our personal space. We don't want people invading that space. Well, when it comes to communication, at least for me, what I've learned is that even though the two of us have been married for 37 years and we're living in the same house, we still have our personal space. But between that personal space, there's a door. And if we don't, and that door has a very strong spring on it. If we don't keep communicating and keep open and honest about our communications, that spring will shut that door in an instant. And then we have to pull really hard, work really hard to open that door back up and gain the confidence in each other again, or the respect and understanding, and be able to move forward. And sometimes it feels like you've taken 1 or 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards when you allow that to occur. But if you learn anything from it, you'll gain that time back, or that lost confidence, and be able to grow from it.
Well, I'd like to say too that it's important that you tell early on your family, particularly if you have small children, explain to them what's happening with you as much as you can understand it yourself, but tell them about your disease and how you're scared too, because they're going to see the changes in you, and it's very important that you continually share with your family about what's going on, and your friends, because if you close up inside and just think, oh, I shouldn't talk about that with them, That's probably the worst thing that can happen, because then that's when your world does close in. So you have to kind of, I have had to learn that if I don't talk about it, nobody else will, because they don't think I want to. So you have to open up.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, Myra. You know, I think we forget sometimes that so much of MS is invisible. You say that you have difficulty walking, but watching you on this webinar looking so confident and articulate and beautiful, it's very hard for somebody, even somebody who loves you very much like Steve, to know what you're feeling like inside. So with so much of MS being invisible, I think your point about how important it is to let other people know what's going on is just critical. People want to help, they care, but they frequently don't know how best to help, or they have no idea what you need because, as the expression goes, but you look so good.
Yeah.
You know, so I really appreciate your emphasizing the importance of that, and even from what you said earlier, Steve, about needing that magic gauge so that you could tell what Myra's feeling at any point in time would help you know what to do.
Right.
So I so much appreciate you two sharing that very, very important experience and learning lesson that you've had.
Yeah. And I'll just add too and reiterate maybe that learning how to talk about it with friends has opened them up or allowed them to start asking questions and become a part of our support system. Up till then, I think we were pushing them away, not intentionally, just by not talking about it.
Right.
They assume we don't want them to know about it, or we don't want them to ask about it.
So when you open up, it's almost like giving them permission
Exactly.
to talk, to ask questions, to be interested. And to Myra's point, I think the same happens with children. When parents talk openly with children and grandchildren in an age-appropriate way about what's going on, that gives children permission and vocabulary to ask their questions. So yeah, I think communication all around is just critically important.
And not only permission to ask questions, but to know that they could help. So I'm feeling very fatigued today, and I can't do the dishes or maybe cook dinner. And your children are old enough that they can help, or maybe clear the table, or whatever it is. They will know that they need to step in, and maybe they don't need to be told to, because they know mom or dad needs help with that.
So now we've talked a lot about how important communication is. So we're going to spend just a couple minutes giving you some tips about how to make that work for you in your relationship and with your support network. So it's important to recognize first that we communicate in lots of different ways. It's not just in conversations, but we also communicate with the tone of our voice, with the expressions on our faces, how we touch another person, our body language, how we behave with another person. All of those things communicate our feelings, our questions, and what's going on with us. And of course, we communicate by email, and then in shorter and shorter versions, we communicate by texting or by tweeting. So we have to be very mindful that we're communicating all the time. And be careful that we communicate in an intentional way. Many couples today tell us that communicating is hard, not just because it's stressful. You can go on to the next slide. Not just because it's stressful, as Myra and Steve have described, but life is busy, right? And so frequently couples report that there's just no good time or good place to have these complicated conversations that they want to have. Or they have a lot of feelings and questions, but they don't know how to put those thoughts and questions into words. It's just easier to let it drop. And of course, in loving relationships, people often worry about upsetting the other person. They don't want to bring up a touchy topic. or bring up something that might hurt the other person's feelings or cause the person to get angry or sad. And some topics are just embarrassing. Sometimes people are embarrassed to talk about some symptoms like bladder or bowel changes, changes in sexual functioning, cognitive changes. Some of these things are just difficult, touchy subjects for some people to talk about. Cognitive changes that we've talked about can really slow the process of conversation. A person with cognitive challenges may find it difficult to keep up with the pace of a conversation, may get lost, or have difficulty remembering what she or he wants to respond. So they get caught up in trying to think of what their next words or thoughts are, and the conversation kind of grinds to a halt. And mood changes can get in the way. When people are very depressed or very anxious, it may be equally hard for them to think about what they want to say or respond without getting very, very emotional. So we have lots of barriers to communication. And in addition to all those barriers, the phrase good communication or effective communication actually encompasses a lot. When you think about it, it's really a tall order. It's not easy, and it's not something that we're very trained in, to communicate in a way that accomplishes all we want to accomplish when we're talking to another person. We really want to communicate in ways that actively convey what we're thinking or feeling, or that put our questions into the right words. We also want to communicate in ways that respect the other person, respect what that other person might be feeling in response to what we're saying. We want to try to send a very clear, unambiguous message so we don't confuse the other person. And usually we want to invite a response, not shut the other person down so that they can't respond or don't want to respond. And when we're communicating effectively, we want to allow that other person time and space to respond. Not all of us are as quick on our feet to respond or put our feelings or thoughts into words. So we want to give that other person the time to respond. So I just want to make a few suggestions here. These are some approaches when you are listening, because as we all should remember, good communication starts with good listening. Frequently, we're quick to talk first and listen later, but if we would listen more, we might get a head start on our good conversation. So try to listen actively and confirm what you've heard. Make sure that you have heard what the other person is trying to convey. Pay attention to your body language when you're listening. If you're rolling your eyes or looking at your cell phone or watching the television or simply doing something else at the same time, your body language says that you don't really care what that person is saying. When you're listening, and if you hear something that is confusing or painful, use a shorthand signal. So if you're very confused or you're getting lost by what the person is saying, you can just put your hand up and say, please wait. I need to understand. And if somebody says something that is painful, you can simply say, ouch. Ouch is a very effective one-word tool to use to say, that hurt my feelings, or that really upset me. It gives the other person a chance to apologize or reframe what they're saying. So use those shorthand signals. Try not to interrupt. Finishing somebody else's sentence, even if they're going pretty slowly, is really annoying. So try not to interrupt. Try to be patient and wait till the end. And don't jump to conclusions. If you're not sure what the other person is saying, thinking, ask. We often make significant mistakes when we jump to the wrong conclusion. And I'm sure there are other suggestions for listening that you can all come up with and share with each other. when you're talking, you need to make time for it. It's not going to magically happen in your day. When your children are grown and gone, or you're retired, there's more time to build it into your day. But when you're still in a busy household, dealing with all kinds of work and parenting commitments, you will actually have to create the time in your day for this to happen. Chances are, as a couple, you do not have exactly the same coping style or the same communication styles. So you need to respect those differences. One of you may be much more of a natural talker. One of you may be much more the silent type or a natural listener. But you need to respect those differences and work with them to make your communication effective. If you need to make a complaint or register an objection, it's really best to start with a gentle I statement. I wish that, I feel that, I think that. You're much less likely to put the other person on the defensive when you do that than if you say, you always make this mistake, or you always do that wrong, or you never, whatever. That just backs somebody in a corner and shuts down a conversation. So start by talking about your own feelings and thoughts, and then give the other person time to think and respond. Try not to overgeneralize. When we accuse people always or never of doing something, that's an overgeneralization that probably isn't true and certainly isn't fair. So try to talk about specific issues when you're trying to make a point or make a request. Dripping with sarcasm will not get you very far. It's a pretty backhanded way of talking to another person and making a request. So try to say what you mean what you say in as direct a way as possible while respecting the other person's feelings. And probably most important, try not to engage in magical thinking. No matter how much you love one another or care about one another, you cannot read each other's minds. You need to ask when you want to know what's going on, and you want to speak up when you want the other person to understand what you need, what you feel, or what you think. We go on to the next slide.
Key takeaways.
With that, we've got some key takeaways. So Myra and Steve, can you share with our audience our key messages?
Sure. Well, the first one, as flight attendants remind us, we, the support partners, need to put on our own oxygen mask before we can assist the person we love. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to stay healthy and alert to everything that's going on within the family structure. And by doing those things, we can best support our partner.
Great.
Number 2 is when one person in the family gets an MS diagnosis, the whole family lives with it. And I think I touched on that earlier, that it's important to share what Roz just said. You have to tell people how you're feeling, what's going on in your mind. Even sometimes your symptoms, you need to tell them so they understand, because they're worried about us that have the MS and they want to know how they can help. But if we don't tell them, they won't know.
And changes in mood and thinking can be even more confusing and challenging than physical symptoms for both of us. The mood and thinking is very internal. It happens slowly. And by the time the support partner realizes it, you're pretty well down the road, I believe.
Number 4 up here says, making sure we support each other will help restore and maintain an effective, balanced relationship. And I think what Steve and I do is that we take turns choosing things that we'd like to do. I might just ask him, what meal do you want tonight? What movie do you want to see? What TV show do you want to watch? So it's not always about me and what I need.
And our ability to communicate openly is key. Again, keeping that heavy spring door open at all times. Keep communicating, keep talking. And if you fall behind, you'll catch up. Just have faith in yourself and your partner, and you'll get there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you so much, Myra and Steve and Roz, for all that great information. And thank you, everyone, for participating. We hope you found those scenarios and polling questions interesting, and also at least part of them relevant to what's going on in your own situation. So we hope that you found that valuable. And we have about 10 minutes for some questions. Thank you to everyone that's submitted questions on the chat box. We're going to try to get to as many as we can in the few minutes that we have left, but I will let you know about other opportunities to submit questions at the end. Probably the most popular set of questions we received was on time management. With MS, things take a lot longer, and people are frequently late, which frustrates spouses, frustrates friends, frustrates employers. Any advice on adapting new time management strategies, and how to communicate to those other people about MS, and to have them understand that time management is a real symptom of MS?
I'd like to answer that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Like we have said over and over, it's so important that you tell people what's going on. So if I'm late to an appointment, I will have to tell you why. For me personally, it takes about 2 hours from the time I get out of the bed to take a shower, eat breakfast, to get completely ready to go somewhere. And then that doesn't count the travel time. So I know that I need to get up earlier, or I have to get started earlier to do whatever activity that we're going to do, so that I know that I can get there on time. But if you communicate to your family, your friends, about that, this is how long it's taking me and this is why. When I hold the curling iron and my hand is shaking and it takes me 10 minutes to curl my hair, or 10 minutes to put a contact lens in, it takes a long time. And so if you explain all those little things that sometimes happen to you and why you are late, I think most people will understand.
And the support partner has to realize that as well. Cracking the whip, as they say, isn't going to make things go any faster. You have to support that time management. Know it's going to take 2 hours, 1 extra hour, whatever it might be, to get ready to do things. And like I said, standing there cracking the whip or tapping your foot or drumming on the table isn't going to make anything go any quicker. In fact, it'll probably actually slow it down, because you're frustrating your partner.
I just have to say one quick thing here, because patience, patience, patience by both of us. I have to be patient with myself. I can't get frustrated, although I do sometimes, but I try to be patient with myself when I'm so slow. But he has to be patient, and that has been a key thing in our relationship, that he never acts like he's upset with me because I'm slow.
But I think the other thing that's really critical here is that, Myra, you have acknowledged that it takes you longer, and you have taken personal responsibility for knowing that it takes you longer, so that you need to make some accommodations in order to get to places on time. I think the greatest frustration comes when that acknowledgement hasn't happened. And the support partners I know tend to get most frustrated because no extra time has been built in. So when you guys are starting from a real positive place, you both know it takes longer, and you both plan for it to take longer, so that you're not late, and so that others around you understand what's going on.
Right.
That's great. Thank you for all those good perspectives and tips. This next question comes from a support partner, which is great. The question is, now that we are in our 70s, how do I care for my partner's MS while also caring for all of the other issues that go along with us aging?
So I'm going to take a start with that one, because I think it's such an important question. And I think that most of the MS population, most people living with MS, are older. That's just a fact of demographics. People with MS are living much longer than they did many years ago. So there are many older people living with MS. And having MS doesn't protect you in any way from all of the other events of aging. And so paying attention to your overall health and wellness, even while you're dealing with MS, is critically important. And there may be some changes that happen to actually distinguish whether they're happening because of MS or they're happening because of aging. But the fact of the matter is that as couples live into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, their focus has to be not just on managing MS symptoms, but on taking care of each other so that you both remain safe, independent, and healthy for all the years of your life.
Great, that's a great point. And we do have a lot of webinars on the Can Do MS website about co-managing aging symptoms. So please check those out. We have time for more questions. I'm sorry if there's an echo, but we'll push through here. We talked a lot about speaking skills and word retrieval skills. Any specific tips for adapting to still be effective at having conversations with other people?
So I'll start with that. I just want to put in a pitch here for anybody who is having any kind of cognitive symptoms, including word retrieval, or communication of any sort, to request a referral to a speech language pathologist. They are the sort of experts at helping people find strategies to deal with whatever problems they're having. And they can talk with you one-on-one and figure out what kinds of word retrieval problems you're having and in what kind of settings, and then give you tips. So, you know, most commonly people need to learn how to just speak up and say, I'm sorry, this will take me a minute. I'm trying to come up with the word that I'm looking for. Or they will come up with a different word to fill in the blank. But usually if you signal to the other person in a minute, that relieves the stress, and then it makes it easier to come up with the word. But again, the speech language pathologists are really the experts at providing these kinds of recommendations based on your individual needs.
Great, thank you. Steve, this question is geared towards you. You know, so many support partners are constantly fighting tiredness and fatigue that it's hard for them to exercise or to have their own social life. Can you talk a little bit briefly about your experience with balancing your own fatigue for helping to care for Myra while still making sure that you have time to exercise and enjoy a social life?
Wow. Balancing the time up for me, about 4 or 5 years ago, I realized that I'd be retiring soon. And so I realized that I wasn't doing anything. I was dedicating a lot of time to supporting Myra in her MS. And I was not taking care of myself. I just enjoy swimming. So what I did is worked with her. We looked at schedules at the local Y when I can go over there to work out. And we built our daily schedule around when we would eat, when we would go exercise, and go do the other things you do as the day progresses. So I don't know that I have a true, honest answer, in-depth answer for what they're looking for, but it was just working with Myra, looking at a calendar and looking at what we do each day and being able to slot that in.
And I think too, I gave him permission to do that. I mean, not that I have to, but that he felt like he should stay home. And I said, no, you go do that. That's good for you. So he came up with it.
People need that motivation and that, not permission, but validation to take care of themselves as support partners. So thank you for bringing that up. I'd like to squeeze in one more question here to Roz, and we have done a whole webinar on this topic, but we do have a lot of people on the webinar that don't have a spouse, that don't have a significant other, and that are living alone. Any resources or any information that we could pull from tonight that would be helpful and relevant to them?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that one's support network can be made up of all different kinds of people. It doesn't have to be someone right there at home. So people find support through online networks and through community resources. And I think the very best way to get ideas and brainstorm for how you could build that support system for yourself would be to look at the archived webinar on the Can Do website called Flying Solo with MS. I think people find many different ways to garner support from others, whether it's virtually or in person, and it really depends on the community you live in. But most of all, it depends on your ability to reach out and network as best you can and try to meet as many people as you can so that you can make connections that help you feel supported, and also connections that help you feel safe, even though you're living alone, because it is important to know how to get help when you need it, particularly in an emergency. So Flying Solo with MS is where I think you should start.